what I've learned working on DE&I in retail is that if you're not very intentional about how you engage your retail store staff, they can feel very difficult to reach. Um, and I think historically it can feel a little bit like DE&I is this kind of nebulous corporate concept, and anything that's kind of coming down can feel just like a little bit of an imposition, and it doesn't feel really like relevant in the retail environment. And so that intention and kind of thinking like, retail first or frontline first, maybe, in your DE&I initiatives, I think that is really important. Like it's got to feel meaningful and relevant in that frontline environment to be successful.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the All Inclusive podcast. On today's episode, I'm joined by Gareth Wally, former head of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Europe at Levi Strauss & Co. We discuss the challenges and solutions in creating a truly inclusive DEI strategy, the hidden barriers often overlooked, and the innovative initiatives like the Welcome platform that are making a difference in the retail space. Gareth shares his insights on the importance of self-work in inclusion, the evolving landscape of disability and LGBTQIA+ rights, and the impact of AI on DEI efforts. As always, before jumping into the video, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on your notification bell, and follow on your favourite podcast platform so that you never miss an episode. That being said, let's jump in. Hi, Gareth.
Hey, Natasha, nice to be here.
Yes, lovely to have you. I'm super excited for this conversation today. You are fellow UK leader. Whoop whoop. So I'm super excited that you're here today.
Yeah, no, I'm really happy to be part of the conversation, and yeah, representing the UK always.
So let's start off with telling our listeners a little bit more about you, your background, how you got into working in DEI, all of that jazz.
Yeah, I'll try and be brief, but it's a funny old story. So, yeah, just starting with me. So my name's Gareth. My pronouns are he and him. And for those listening, I'm a white man from the UK. I have been working in the DE&I space full time for about 5 years now. But prior to that, I spent most of my career in a broader kind of HR capacity. So I've been all over HR, worked in shared services leadership, HR transformation, a lot of time in reward and recognition. I've also been an HR business partner. Um, Came to DE&I in 2019, really as a result of a career conversation that was centered around me wanting to kind of explore new territory. I've been working in the reward space at one employer at that point for about 5 years, and was kind of ready for a change. And what kind of brought me to the DE&I work was the leader that was recruiting at the time was really looking for somebody who had, a really good knowledge of the organization and kind of navigating a really truly global landscape from a change management perspective, and just somebody who could really evidence having like got shit done on a global stage.
Yeah.
And obviously, DE&I as a topic as an HR professional is always there. It's always part of your experience. And then for me, as a queer person and as someone who came from a working class background, I'd obviously had my experiences of what it feels like to not see yourself, not necessarily feel like you belong. But also, as I said, I'm white, I'm male. I was born into a body that I identify with. I've never had struggles that are related to my gender identity or the color of my skin. I'm not yet disabled. And I like to always say that, not yet disabled, because
Yeah.
most of us will experience that at some point. And so I had to ask myself some pretty tough questions about, yes, the organization is putting its faith in me and its trust in me to be able to do this work, but actually, with all of the privilege that I have, am I the right person to do this work? But I came to the conclusion that actually I can use my privilege for positive change. I can bring a perspective to conversations with others who identify with majority identities to kind of change mindsets and think through things in a different way. So that was sort of how I got over that psychological hump, if you like, in terms of moving into DE&I. And so I led global inclusion for 3 years at the Coca-Cola Company. And then in 2023, moved into a role which was a more focused kind of regional role in Europe, leading DE&I for Europe with Levi Strauss and Co. And then just recently left that organization. And as we're recording this today, I'm in the process of setting up my own HR consultancy with a specialism in DE&I, as well as reward and recognition and, change management and communication. So it's an exciting kind of pivotal moment as we're speaking today.
Yes, I love that. Well, congratulations.
Thank
And
you.
I'm thrilled for you. And I know the work that you have put in throughout the previous organizations that you've been at, and your passion is true and it is shining so brightly. And so, how do you define true inclusion?
Oh, wow. That is a huge question. Um, so I would start with the fact that inclusion is a human experience and it is a very complex experience to kind of pin down because it comes from all sorts of different areas. So, broadly speaking, if you think about, working in an organization, there are elements of inclusion that are created from your perceptions and experiences of the organization at large. That might be, for example, how you perceive leadership showing up. It might be how you experience the programs and practices of the organization at large. There are then elements of your experience of inclusion which are very much tied to the leader that you're working with, so your manager and how they behave and the inclusive leadership characteristics that they kind of display. Part of it, which is quite often underestimated, is then the experiences that are created as a result of the team climate that you're working within and the way that you interact with peers and the way that, there's a sense of, teamwork, collaboration, looking out for each other's psychological safety as part of a team environment. And then there's also stuff which is, a little bit more kind of personal and it's kind of about how you as an individual show up and how you kind of push yourself to feel included. And I know that sounds really weird, right? Because you expect it to come from all these other areas where it's happening to you.
Yeah, but I agree with I get where you're coming from, because I do think it's the same thing when we talk about career development, right? And we're
Yeah,
like, you want to do this and that, but there's also you want to try and have a mentor and a sponsor and all these other things. But one of the key parts of career development, which we will talk about, is you yourself going and showing up and advocating for yourself. Like you have to kind of put the effort in as well. It's like a two-way street. And I
100%.
and actually I'm so glad that you touched on it, because I haven't actually heard that from another leader, is that self work we need to do when it comes to inclusion, and to really kind of look at ourselves and say, like, well, what have you done to feel included in this environment?
Exactly right. And I think it sometimes it's difficult, right? So when you're thinking about things like authenticity, for example, like authenticity is a real indicator of the existence of inclusion. If people feel like they can be authentic in a workplace, that's an indication that inclusion exists. And obviously there is a need for like a fundamental baseline of psychological safety in order for you to feel like you can be authentic. But the more that you do that, and especially if you're in a leadership position with an organization, the more that you can really show your authentic self in all of that, facets, that's you leaning into inclusion. It makes you feel more included, but it also will show, that is a positive for others as well.
Yeah, no, I love that. So I'm gonna switch up a little bit. you've been a trailblazer for disability inclusion and LGBTQ plus rights. And so I want to hear from you a little. What changes have you seen lately to the way in which we as a society kind of approach these sorts of topics and areas?
I think you're very kind with your words. I think trailblazer is a big word, and I'm not sure that I can wear that badge. Thank you for your kindness. Yeah, so these are spaces that I think, the organizations tend to struggle with beyond, creating an environment where, for example, an ERG, an employee resource group, can be created and employees of those identities can kind of, come together to raise awareness and educate and celebrate. And they're all great and wonderful things, of course. But I think we have to recognize that it has to go beyond that, because in society at large, both people with disabilities and people who identify as LGBTQIA plus face barriers, beyond what's happening in the workplace. And actually, employers can play a really key role in overcoming some of those barriers. So if I start with, people with disabilities, for example, I mean, first of all, we know that 80% of disabilities, I believe is the stat, are acquired during working age. So it's not necessarily that you're born with a disability, but that you acquire it as you're, getting older. And of course, that increases with age, right? The likelihood of becoming disabled, whether that be permanently or temporarily, increases as age increases. And so there's a need for us to recognize that it's not a fixed position. It changes over time, and the more people, kind of continue their workplace experience, the more either themselves or a family member or someone close to them is likely to become disabled. So I think that's a big part of it. Another part of it is that the vast majority of disabilities are invisible, and so we can't make assumptions, around who is disabled and who isn't. And actually, we have to assume that probably about 20% of our workforce is living with some form of disability. That kind of would mirror what the public stats tend to tell us. Um, and I often hear, leaders or, companies say, oh, well, we haven't really got any disabled people here. So it's not really a priority for us to develop,
I know. I
you
so
know,
oh, I hate that.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think if you come into it with an assumption that disability exists in all its forms in your organization, regardless of whether you can see it or not, and then you start to plan for that, that's a good starting point. Starts with things like accessibility, whether that's physical workplace or, digital, in terms of your websites and the tools that you use within your kind of digital workplace. But it also starts with the environment of understanding and empathy, and actually, considering everybody as an individual and taking their needs as individual needs, and having really great conversations about what they might be. So for example, if you are recruiting, making it clear to people that, you know, reasonable adjustments or accommodations are available for everyone, whether that's from a formal registered disability or not. Making sure that people are given the opportunity to ask for, help in whatever they need, coming into the workplace and ongoing, right? Again, remembering that a lot of disabilities are acquired, and so making sure that that's an open and ongoing kind of offer. And then also just making sure that where the opportunities exist, that there is a constant sort of flow of communication, storytelling, visibility, around disability, and taking moments in the calendar. There's so many of these moments of, acknowledgement and awareness of different conditions. And then, of course, there's International Day of Persons with Disabilities on the 3rd of December each year. Really using those to kind of, not only highlight what you're doing as an organization and kind of reinforce that you're a disability inclusive employer, but also, again, bringing those stories to life in service of, kind of overcoming some of those barriers. Now, everything that I've talked about there is fairly basic, to be honest, and there's a whole lot more that we can do. But I think that, you know, if you're starting from zero, like there would be the places that I would start from.
Mm.
From a LGBTQIA plus perspective, it's not dissimilar in terms of concept, but in terms of the things that you would put in place, you know, obviously they look different. You know, if we think about the LGBTQIA plus community globally, there's somewhere between 60 and 70 countries in the world that still criminalize same-sex acts between consenting adults. There are so few countries around the world that, you know, offer legal gender recognition. There are still so many countries in the world where conversion therapy has not been banned and is a current active practice. And, you know, intersex people, especially intersex children, you know, face really invasive and sometimes really damaging surgeries, which are not, you know, by their own choice. So the global external landscape for the community is still pretty horrific, right? And even in some of the more progressive countries, these things are still in place. Like I'll take the UK as an example. Like after years and years of talking about it and successive, you know, ministers and governments, you know, committing to look into a ban of conversion therapy, we still haven't achieved it. So this is not a third world problem. This is, you know, this is a major problem all around the world. And you have to then reflect on, well, how does that affect the people within the workforce that identify as part of this community, whether that be psychologically, whether it be through their own personal experiences, or whether it be because, you know, secondarily they feel and see what's happening in the world and it touches them, you know, personally. And so again, it's not just enough to be, you know, putting a rainbow flag on your logo during Pride Month or, you know, sending out an email on Ida Hobbit, which coincidentally we're recording today on Ida Hobbit 2024. It's May 17th. So happy Ida Hobbit, everyone. But, you know, those little acknowledgements and kind of celebrating Pride, like, again, it's all great, but actually there's a real need to kind of keep the drumbeat going all year round on LGBTQIA plus inclusion and making sure that your policies consider, you know, families of all types, they consider individuals of all genders. They are not only not discriminating, but actively including, you know, the different needs of different identities within the LGBTQIA plus community. I think also, you know, thinking about the way that you show up potentially from a consumer perspective and a brand perspective, like you've got to be really careful that you maintain a balance between what you do externally versus what you do internally. Because what you don't want to happen is your employees feel like, you know, you're out there supporting LGBTQIA plus rights externally and you're not doing anything for your own employees. So you've really got to kind of keep that balance, you know, finely managed, if you like.
Yeah,
I feel
definitely.
like I could go on for ages,
No,
but
no,
I'm conscious that I've
I
just babbled
agree.
for a long
No,
time. So
not at all. I'm leaning in. I agree. I think it's so important. I think it's we need to kind of shift from a reactive state to a proactive state, and one that is welcoming of all, with the consideration that everyone is at different points in their journeys. Like, I think when we talk about inclusion, like, we do speak and say, like, look, it's for everyone, like, which is true, it is for everyone. But in order for it to really feel inclusive for all and fair for everyone, you need to understand that we're all kind of at different points because of what's happened to us, whether physically, like you said, secondary, like where we come from, our cultures, our backgrounds, our beliefs, how we identify. Because of some of those barriers that the society has put up for us, we are all at different points. So in order for me to feel like I feel included there, you're going to have to do a bit of extra things than, say, Sarah, who lives in a different country, do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it matters. So I know during your time at Levi, you played a key role in the implementation of the Welcome platform at some of Levi's stores, which I think is incredible. And I'd love for our listeners to just give a snippet in terms of what the Welcome platform actually is and what it does, but also just some more information on, like, how did that even come about? Like, what sparked the idea of having this particular platform a part of the stores?
yeah, cool. I'm really glad you've mentioned this, Natasha, actually, because I'm really proud of what we were able to do there. And the story of how that came about is a really strong reinforcement of the power of the network. And especially when it comes to disability inclusion, there are so many people out there doing great work, but if you're not looking, you might not find it. So I came to Wellcome through a series of interactions. So early on in my time in DE&I was introduced to Kate Nash, who founded Purple Space, which is an organization which is all about disability ERGs and really kind of empowering them to have an impact in their organization. Kate introduced me to Victoria Jenkins, who's a disabled fashion designer, runs a wonderful company called Unhidden. And through my conversation with Victoria, I then got introduced to Gavin Neat. And Gavin is the founder, CEO, and guru at Wellcome. And so through that chain of connections, Gavin and I ended up getting together, and I understood, the offering of Wellcome. What Wellcome does, it's a web-based technology, proximity-based, essentially, that enables for free a disabled consumer to register a profile with Wellcome. And once they have a profile, they can then view venues in broad terms that offer the Wellcome platform. And then they can use that platform to essentially view the accessibility features available at a venue, and they can book a visit. Now, on the company or the venue side, what you're able to do is manage a profile that obviously shares that accessibility information through the Wellcome platform with potential end users. You can lay out very clearly what you can and can't do, or what you do and don't have from an accessibility perspective. But then you're able to manage a conversation or an interaction with a consumer before they even visit your venue. So let's say, for example, I am a wheelchair user, I'm in Liverpool, and I want to go to the Levi's store on Tuesday. I can go to Wellcome. I can see what the specific Liverpool Levi's store has in terms of, features that might meet my needs. And I can book a visit with that store. And it sends a notification to the store staff to let them know that I'm going to be coming in on Tuesday at 11 o'clock. And here are the needs that I have. So as a wheelchair user, the platform will give the staff in the store guidance on how to create great customer service for a wheelchair user. And there's a whole bunch of different disabilities and conditions, with content in the platform that gives real-time learning to the staff in the store. So they're not relying on remembering what they learned on that disability awareness training 2 years ago that they did, but it's real time. Like it's, let's say it's Friday now, I'm coming in on Tuesday. Okay, I can prepare for this visit. And we know that this individual's coming. And what we were really able to do, which I thought was wonderful at Levi's, was you can customize the questions that you ask the user. So when they're booking their visit, we were able to say to them, look, are you looking for something specific? Are there particular products within the range that you're interested in? And then we can get stuff ready for them. So it's not like a cold kind of come in and just start from scratch, but it's a real opportunity to get ahead of their needs. So, it's pretty new. Levi's launched early February in 13 stores in the north, so kind of west of Scotland, northwest of England, and Northern Ireland and Dublin. Seen quite a bit of traffic already, but obviously, it takes a while for the awareness to build. It takes a while, you to get good experience. But yeah, shout out to Gavin at the Wellcome, team, because the platform that they've built is excellent. I've seen more large retailers come on board since Levi's did as well. And, retail is a space where folks with disabilities often feel excluded. And I'm just excited to see that grow.
It's impressive, the technology, and it does shine a light on how having a really good network and being able to share knowledge within each other can really help move us forward. So thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, I know implementing something such as this probably didn't go without its challenges. So what were some of the challenges that you faced that were like kind of standout ones, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, like any DE&I initiative, you're always subject to the availability of resources and funding. for your initiatives. And, even though the cost of the Welcome platform in isolation is not, huge, it's pretty low cost. It's positioned within a much broader set of initiatives, which all require some level of resourcing or funding. So there's always that conversation about, well, is this the right time? Do we have the funding right now? How's it going to be managed, etc.? And then, with something like this, especially because Levi's was the first mainline retailer to go live in the platform, there's a bit of a leap of faith element to it, because there was no kind of evidence, if you like, this was going to work in chain retail. So there's obviously the usual kind of stakeholder management, influencing, essentially convincing stakeholders and leaders to kind of take that leap of faith and go with the flow. I think the thing that really set us up for success with this particular implementation was, one, I had a just amazing partnership from the district manager at Levi's for that whole region. So shout out to Neil Vidler if he's listening. He's a major advocate for DE&I broadly, and really knew that he needed to do more with his team on disability, and actually gave us the opportunity during a district meeting just before the platform launched, which is essentially to bring all of his store managers together for a whole day of disability awareness training. So we had Gavin there from Welcome. We also had a team there from Happy Smiles Training. So they really kind of led the training itself. And actually we captured all of it on video through that Diverse Made Media, sorry. So shout out to Chris Lynch as well. So really bringing together disabled owned or ally owned businesses to create a moment that kind of set the scene, so that it wasn't just a cold launch, but actually we'd kind of done the pre-work. And so those store managers had a really in-depth learning. They were able to take that back to their teams in store, ready for the platform launching. And then we were able to test it out beforehand, like dummy visits and that kind of stuff.
And also you get those that are actually on the ground that will be interacting with this platform. Their buy-in into, their real true buy-in into why this is going to be so beneficial for their customers, and also educationally for them as well as individuals. I think I would like to think most people like helping other people. They want to be able to help other people. And you want people to have good experiences when they meet with you, regardless of whether it's if I go into a store or if I'm entertaining people at my home. If someone meets with me, I want them to have a great interaction with me. And so I think that you taking that extra step and really sitting down with everybody that is going to be interacting with this and your employees, and just explaining this is what it's going to do, and here's a little bit more information around how we can make people that may not necessarily directly relate with you, how you can make them still feel included. And how they can still have a fantastic experience in our store.
100%. And especially in the retail environment, right? I mean, customer service is fundamentally, what we're doing. And if your customer service is lacking for people with disabilities simply because of lack of knowledge, this is a great solution, to build that bridge. And I've seen some beautiful, testimonials from customers who've used the platform and come into store, on social media, because they've been like, this was literally a world-class experience. We had one who literally said, I'm never buying jeans anywhere else ever again.
Fantastic. That's what you want.
Perspective, the business case is there. You've won a consumer who becomes loyal and sticks with the brand as a result of creating the experience. So again, when you think about, the convincing and the sourcing, the funding, all of that stuff, you're starting now to prove the return on the investment. And that's what's needed to potentially expand and go further.
And I think as time's going on now, as a whole society, we are now in a position where we are putting our money where, carefully putting them in the hands of people that we genuinely trust and share the same sentiment, same values as we do. The consumer has got the power, right? If I see an organization that isn't as included as I feel it should be, I'm probably not going to go back there and I'm going to spend my money elsewhere. And so I totally am thrilled that this initiative has gone well. And I'm excited for other retail stores and other organizations to jump on board this train too, because it's going to impact so many lives. What advice would you give to leaders when they're trying to kickstart a particular initiative and it's a brand new one, there's not a track record? What advice would you give?
If I think about that broadly, I think, what I've learned working on DE&I in retail is that if you're not very intentional about how you engage your retail store staff, they can feel very difficult to reach. And, I think historically it can feel a little bit like DE&I is this kind of, nebulous corporate concept, and anything that's kind of coming down can feel just like a little bit of an imposition, and it doesn't feel really like relevant in the retail environment. And so that intention and kind of thinking like, retail first or frontline first, maybe, in your DE&I initiatives, I think that is really important. Like, it's got to feel meaningful and relevant in that frontline environment to be successful. And I think in order to do that, of course, you've got to listen to and seek out the voices of the staff in retail, or in other frontline environments. It's very difficult, for example, for them to take an hour off the shop floor to listen to an ERG webinar. Like, that's just a business reality, So you've got to think about ways of engaging differently at that local level. So they're still getting the sense of, this is our values, this is a priority to this organization, this is what it's all about. You find different ways of them engaging with it, as I say, in a way that feels really meaningful and relevant locally. You will find, especially in retail, the staff that work in your stores deal with every kind of consumer every single day. They've got more of an appreciation for all kinds of diversity than many other people would ever have, because they simply see it and they live it and they breathe it every single day. And so what I've found is it's an incredibly fertile ground for advancing conversations around DE&I. And actually, there's a real pull and a real desire to get involved. But again, it's the how, right? It's how you engage and how you, again, listen to the voices of retail about the ways that they work, the needs that they have, and then respond to them in a way which is very bespoke and not just like a vanilla or one size fits all company-wide approach. So that's my main advice, is just, start with the voice of the retailers themselves.
Oh, I love that, Gareth. That's some really great advice there. So I'm gonna shift our lens a little bit wider.
Okay.
What topic within DEI do you feel that there's not enough airtime? Like, what do you think that we should be talking a little bit more on?
I mean, I think disability is definitely one. I always say that the conversation about disability is underrepresented in a conversation about underrepresentation, right? And actually, you could argue is the largest minority on earth consistently all around the world, right? So that definitely comes first to mind. And within that, of course, there's the conversation about neurodivergence. You can choose to put it within the conversation about disability or separately. I think that one's growing rapidly and does need more attention. I think there is also a growing conversation about the intersection of DE&I and the use of AI, artificial intelligence, and the way that there are huge possibilities and huge potential in the world of AI for helping us to advance. But there are also major risks and flaws and pitfalls in terms of the way that AI is, designed and programmed, the way that machine learning is kind of operating, not taking into account the, perspectives and needs and experiences of different people. So you put, majority-led experience in, you get majority-led experience out, and that's not helping us to advance from an equity perspective. So I think that's a really big topic and a really, interesting but also difficult and kind of uncharted territory for many DE
Yeah,
and I
literally, you
practitioners,
took the
right?
words out of my mouth. I was saying it's one of those areas that it's like, oh, I'm leaning in, but I'm not putting my hand up because I don't know what the answer is. And I don't actually know what my position is yet. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
But
So,
it, but
yeah,
again, that highlights the importance of the network and the importance of partnerships and being well connected, both within and outside your organization. As a DE&I practitioner, you can't sit at your desk and expect to just, desk-based research, understand all of the implications and everything that you need to know, right? You need to be talking to your internal teams who are managing the digital space and how the company is operating from an AI perspective. Talking to peers in other organizations that may be a little bit more advanced in this space and figuring out, what they've been doing. But being humble with that, and not trying to be the expert, recognizing that you're not, but kind of plugging into the places where you can build your expertise and also bring your expertise to the conversation. Once you understand the landscape, you can spot the areas where you can actually provide a perspective that might not have been provided, and that will then help, to build more kind of equity within that sort of new frontier.
yeah, no, I agree. I think sometimes ego can be like the biggest setback sometimes. And it's just really just taking a step away and just being like, actually, I'm not sure. I don't know. What is the answer? Can someone help me? And using your initiative to find out who are the right people to speak to. I think that's
Yeah.
that's a massive skill set. And if you have that skill, I do generally find that leaders with that skill set are the ones that are most successful in what they do. So
Yeah, yeah, and also think about it from the perspective of a leader in that digital kind of AI space. Maybe they've never found their own personal kind of connection or hook to the DE&I agenda before, and actually, you might have an opportunity to win someone over to your, the broader DE&I agenda because you've finally found the thing that enables them to connect much more deeply than they have before. So, exploring that and exploring new relationships and partnerships that help you learn as a DE&I practitioner might also serve you well, kind of as a two-way street kind of thing.
yeah, definitely. So that leads on to my next question for you. It's like, what's your vision for the future of DEI? AI probably is one part of your answer. But what else do you foresee?
Look, I think we are generally at a point of inflection now. So, I've only been working in this space for 5 years, but I know from, both my experience in those 5 years and also from talking to practitioners who've been doing this for a lot longer, there's an ebb and flow, right? There are peaks and troughs in terms of, appetite for the work, funding and investment and resourcing for the work. The door was flung open in 2020 with COVID and the murder of George Floyd. And, suddenly organizations were throwing so much more resource and money into trying to make progress on DE&I. And I think, unfortunately, as the heat has reduced over the course of those years, that door, gradually started to close. And unfortunately, in some organizations, it's already slammed shut. And I think that trend of, ebbs and flows, over the years will continue. So I think as practitioners, we've got to be really smart on recognizing that there's unfortunately still a need to reinforce the business case for DE&I. While I sometimes I think, God, surely everybody by now understands
No, I know. I agree with you. I think
the
it's true.
advantages. It's like you've just got to be ready to keep reinforcing that and maybe changing the way that you use language to do that, reflecting the way that the world is changing, especially currently where there is a fairly significant, backlash, certainly in the US, which is bleeding out a little bit more globally as well. Organizations kind of pulling back a bit through fear of getting it wrong. There's a lot of kind of litigation and legislation in the US, which is obviously a source of fear as well. And even, here in the UK, I mean, people are starting to talk about Section 28 version 2.0 in terms of, the government pulling back on sex education in schools and that kind of thing. So, the external landscape is always going to be a source of both distress, but also, I think, inspiration for how we evolve our practice and how we evolve the language that we use to keep making sure that our work continues. I think, I always say that this work is essentially about unpicking centuries of systemic oppression. And that doesn't happen overnight. So whether you're a practitioner who's been doing this for 20 years or 5 years like me, or coming in just this year to start doing this work, you've got to recognize that it's a long slog, because something that's been built up over such a long time, it's also going to take a long time to get to the point. And that's why I always talk about, yes, the end goal is equality and justice, but actually where the work is equity. We've got to really focus on strategic interventions that help achieve equity. And the reason I say all that is because when I think about vision for DE&I, a lot of it is more of the same. Like, yes, technology might come in and, present risks and also like enablement, absolutely. And there'll be world events and crises and things that, lead us to, pivot and change. But actually the mission is the same. And I think the future mission remains the same. We're working towards equality and justice through the practice of equity and inclusion, essentially.
Oh, I love that, Gareth. I mean, I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today. I could speak to you for so much longer. Thank you so much for all of the insights that you shared with us. It is truly impactful, the work that you're doing, and appreciate all of the work that you're doing. I'm excited for what's to come and what's ahead for you. For all those that are listening, how best can they connect with you?
Yeah, so if you look for me on LinkedIn, Gareth space Whalley on LinkedIn, it's just a simple profile name. That for now is the best place to contact me. But as soon as my consultancy is up and running and ready to go, of course, I'll be sharing through LinkedIn, the website and, the offering that I'm putting out there as well. So yeah, look out for me on LinkedIn. That's the best place to go.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I will be putting a link down below to your LinkedIn profile. So for everyone who's listening, you should definitely check out Gareth, and you can follow all of the great work that he's going to be doing in the future. Thank you once again, Gareth. Super excited.
Thanks for having me, Natasha. This was awesome. Appreciate the chance to chat.